Hey there, podcaster. I am so excited you are here. We're talking about why podcasting is a game changer for your business. Whether you have a podcast or you don't have a podcast and you're thinking about starting one, this is going to be a great place to start because we really need to talk beyond the downloads, but we also need to talk about what those downloads and how having a podcast can actually benefit your business, your life, and everything in between. I'm really excited. So we're going to talk about some podcast stats. We're going to talk about networking because podcasting is your networking bestie. And we're going to talk about how to repurpose your podcast. This is going to be a short, quick hit, but I really want you to know how podcasting can change the game in your business and in your life so that you can actually reach those dreams without having to work 70 to 80 hours a week, which let me tell you, I have done to try to make the ends meet, but you don't have to do that. If you capitalize on this game-changing platform and you repurpose it, again, with a strategy that actually works, this isn't just cutting up little pieces, you truly can actually make a difference and actually build your business. So are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to Beyond the Downloads. I'm Jen, your podcast bestie, here to tell you there's so much more about podcasting than just those numbers. So before you throw in the towel, you better listen up. We're diving deep into the heart of what makes podcasting truly special, from storytelling to connection, and yes, even healing. Think of me as your podcast life raft, ready to help you navigate those choppy waters of this podcasting world and the podcast overwhelm. From understanding the therapeutic power of sharing your voice to the practical tips to grow your show without losing your ever-loving mind. If you're ready to ditch the hustle and create content that leaves a legacy, a tsunami impact, no more ripples. Whether you're launching your first show or looking to take your podcast to the next level, I'm here to help you grow, launch, and yes, make some money from your passion. Let's make your podcasting dreams your reality. It's time to go beyond the downloads, where your story becomes a legacy. So as many of you know, I have had some serious success with podcasting. I just recently shared in my social media. Yes, I still use social media. I'm using it strategically now, so we're not spending hours and hours and hours doing nothing because remember, social media is there and gone where podcasting is your legacy. So if you don't know my story, podcasting actually saved my life. I didn't know what I was getting into at all when I first started. And I just woke up one morning, I was like, I'm going to be a podcaster. And unlike most people, I didn't even think about it. I launched it that same day. Cause why not? Do I recommend that? For some people, yes, I do. For other people, I recommend having a little bit of a strategy, but I didn't really know what the podcast was going to become, nor did I know that podcasting and networking capability that I had was actually going to save my life. So podcasting has been a huge part of my journey. It has saved my life. I wouldn't be on this planet without podcasting. I can honestly say that. And truly, this is why this is so important to me. But first, we've got to talk a little bit about like podcasting statistics. More than 85% of podcasts fail. They don't make it past episode 7. And this makes me so sad. In January 2024, and I get this because if you look at the stats in January 2024, this year, they came out with how many downloads everybody gets. And like the average podcast for 50% or more of podcasts is only getting like 24 downloads. That can be heartbreaking. But what people don't understand, which is why this podcast is here, is that those 24 downloads are actually making a bigger impact than anything you're doing on social media. They're consuming longer. Those 24 people, if positioned correctly, could all be customers. And let me tell you, having 24 people, if you have a mastermind, that might be your whole salary for a year or 2 years, depending on how big your platform is and how much your costs are. So thinking about this, we also have to start looking at like what's happening in the podcast world. As you know, YouTube tried to have podcasts. Then they had a podcast playlist. It's not a podcast. Now YouTube actually has RSS feeds because they ditched Google Podcasts. When big players like this start thinking about RSS feeds and podcasting, we need to pay attention. So why do so many people fall off at that 85%? Well, it's hard. And it becomes harder and harder. Recently, Libsyn and a lot of other players like Spotify for podcasters, which I'm not a huge fan of, but Libsyn was my favorite. And you could record directly into your phone, meaning you could set up your cool intro and your outro. You could record directly in your phone. The app, it allowed you to go through it, and it made it pretty easy. Can you still do it from your phone? Yes. Does it take a little bit more work? Yes. Do I think this is a good or a bad thing? I kind of think it's a good thing because we won't have as many pop-up podcasts that fade away, and maybe we'll start getting some more quality content because people will spend a little bit of time editing. That being said, it's also now going to make it harder for some people that are on the go that didn't want to have to do any editing, but you have things like Riverside. You have things like Descript, and these are all things that you can use on browsers while you are out and about in the world. Riverside, I'm actually recording in Riverside right now. It's amazing. Love it. Are there some drawbacks? Yes, but there's some cool thing that's coming out. They're starting to add AI. If you're looking for AI for copy, CapShow is still 100% my favorite. And with the new CapShow version that just rolled out, oh my goodness, it talks just like me and says the wrong words in the right places. It's so perfect. But I think so many people fade out because they hang out with people like me. And I'm going to say that through and through because I did this to you, and we need to make things easier. And step by step, podcasting it is elite because it does take more work than other platforms. You do have to put a little bit more editing in. It's just like if you want a successful YouTube channel, you got to edit your videos a little bit. Do I edit my videos? No, but my core platform is my podcast. I repurpose over to YouTube. Sorry, YouTube, but it's true. So some of the main reasons for pod fade is sometimes you feel like you get yourself stuck in a box. And this is why I created my podcast CPR audit. And if you want one of those, it's podcast CPR. You'll see some of them live on this podcast. You'll see a bunch of people coming in and out. But if you're really stuck, podcastcpr.com, the audit might be there for you. But at 7 episodes, why are so many people stopping? Again, because it feels hard, because you're over repurposing. You're trying to create all this content. And I get it. I'm a podcast producer. My main gig is podcast production, management, and social media. It's a lot of work, a ton of work. And if you are spending all your time repurposing and not building good quality content, you're just putting shit all over the place and it's not going to work. And of course, it's not going to grow. So there is a strategic way to repurpose your podcast. And I hate to tell you, but in all reality, it's not normally cutting a bunch of clips up and putting them all over the place. Can you get a little bit of traction with that? Yeah. Are there better ways to do it that actually take less time? Oh, yeah. But that being said, for those of you that are sticking around, the conversion rate from a podcast is so much higher than any other platform because people are there to learn from you. They're there to connect with you. They're there to do more with you. Social media, they're scrolling. They're trying to get those quick hits. Yeah, maybe they've joined you live. Maybe you're doing a card pull, whatever. But they're not tuned into something specific. So if you're somebody who does like a meditation or why am I forgetting the word? A hypnosis or an activation, or as you see, I do EFT tapping. If you're somebody who does that, this is a great tool for you because you're getting people somewhere where you're subconsciously getting into their minds through audio only, which let me tell you, most people who are listening to a podcast are doing something that is meditative. So now they're in a meditative state listening to you, subconscious. They're listening longer. They're paying more attention to you. Easier to make that conversion. So your rates, those 24 downloads that I told you that, 50% of podcasts have per episode, the conversion rate is going to be higher than on any other platform because they're actually going on a deep journey with you, getting to know you. And they're loyal. They're so freaking loyal. So using podcasting as a networking, we're going to just go through some of these really quick. Outside of them being loyal, it's a great way to network. You can have people on your show that could be potential clients. I'm not saying get on and be the skeezy salesperson and come on my show and then immediately pitch them for your services. No, get them on your show, create a genuine connection. The other thing is that's giving you market research, Get people on your shows, coaches and people that you want to cross promote or maybe you can't work with. I've worked with a bunch of coaches for an hour on my show, unintentionally getting what I needed while promoting them. There's some great tools. It allows you to expand your network, and it's so much better than saying, let's get on a coffee chat. It's just like my audits. I love doing my CPR audits, podcastcpr.com, because I get to give 45 minutes of my time. We create a 30-day action plan. I support them. They give me content for my podcast so you can see. They also get to be on my podcast, which allows them to their podcast to be seen. So it's like a win-win-win-win-win. You can build those connections. You can create those interviews and those collaborations, and you can build a community this way. It's really amazing. One of my mentors actually does a monthly Zoom call. They record them and they put them out where they're teaching, and then they go through a round table and share and share and share. Word of mouth is so stinking powerful. So what are some of the benefits for podcasting for your business? Authority and trust. You get this instant authority because podcasting is still elite compared to everything else. When you look around, how many blogs are out there? How many people are billions of people are on social media? We're still in the hundreds of thousands in podcasting. And if you start thinking about the ones that are actually active that made it past that 7 episodes, wow, it's a wild, wild west. So you immediately gain authority and trust if you continually show up and you serve and you serve and you serve. This is also a benefit to your business because from this one piece of content, I'm going to be creating reels. I'm going to be creating a blog. I'm going to be creating YouTube. I'm going to be creating some pins. Now, do I want you doing all of that before you get overwhelmed? No. Pick one platform and get really good at it. Find out where your people are hanging out. I'm still finding out where y'all hang out, so I have to test all the things. This doesn't mean this is what I want you to do. But having a long form piece of content and optimizing it, getting that SEO down, like where people are actually searching with what I call boring fingers. Now, these boring fingers are what people are actually typing into Google versus what they're thinking or saying. There is a difference, I promise you. But you have this long form content. So I have all of these little mini micro pieces that I can record a reel about and invite somebody to come listen. You want more information? Come listen to my podcast. I can create, static posts of here's the steps, here's the benefits for your business. I can create all these different pieces of content. Yes, it's creating new content, but let me tell you, instead of finding clips and trying to do all of that, it's actually way quicker. And especially if you do, I have a checklist that I go through, not a checklist, a bullet point so that I don't go too far off of topic for you. It builds that momentum and that long-term momentum. And because we've optimized it for long-term, long-form content, if your content is relevant in 6 years, it will still get found. And for most of you who follow me and hang out, you're healers, you're changemakers, you're people that move through trauma, you're people that help step into their best selves, your coaches. Most of that is going to continue to go forward. So if you set yourself up correctly, legacy. And it also brings brand awareness. And you can get in front of other people. It's also like a sample, highlight reel of you talking in case you ever want to be on stage like I'm doing. Like I said, repurposing content like crazy. You don't just have to take clips. You can do step by step by step. There's tons of steps in here. There's tons of benefits in here. Each one of these could be a static post. Each one of these I could go deeper on a reel and then invite you into the podcast episode. You can turn it into a blog post, social media snippets, YouTube videos, Pinterest posts, depending on what you are. Have one client right now who's kind of a homesteader. So we put ton of stuff on Pinterest because people are looking for that stuff on Pinterest. Knowing your audience is so stinking important. Tools and tips. There's so many tips in here that I could go deeper on in both my podcast and in my social media content, which I can direct people over. Because remember, when people are on social media, they're there to consume. When they go to a podcast, they're wanting to absorb and go deep. So there's so much to do. And I don't want you to think that a lot of you are getting into this, like, I got to repurpose on all the platforms. And I see this all the time. One of my coaches has this checklist and you're like trying to make it a game. And you're like in so many different places at once that it burns you the hell out because you're spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, all of a sudden like 25 hours a week creating content. Well, if you have another side gig or you want to coach or whatever that, that happens, all of a sudden you're up in the 70s and 80-hour work week to try to maintain. And it burns you out. It truly burns you out. I mean, I'm burnt out from the production stuff. That's why I hired somebody finally. But there's a way to maximize your long-term content, to make this micro content to share on the right platforms once you get to know your audience. Is it trial and error at first? Yes, it is. Are there some great things for having YouTube? Yes, but YouTube, unless you're putting the RSS feed into YouTube Music, the YouTube playlist is just that. It's a video. It's a YouTube video. It's not a podcast. If it's not attached to your RSS feed, it's not a damn podcast. But that's another episode. So I just want you to remember that, like, podcasting is the wild, wild west. There's room for you. There's so many benefits of how it can be your networking business bestie. There's so many advantages to your business. Even with low numbers, the conversion rates are so high if you position it properly and you serve and you serve and you serve. And there's so much content that can become created from this one thing. You pick a core theme for the month, a core theme for the week, and you have content and content and content. And you just keep breaking it down into micro pieces. And it really does make things so easy. There's no more guessing, especially if you're a multi-passionate where your brain is all over the place like mine. It allows you to kind of like keep on track. So if you are really struggling and you're either ready to launch your podcast, ready to give up on your podcast, but you know you can pivot, head over to podcastcpr.com. Grab a 45-minute podcast audit with that way. Let me help you breathe life back into it. Let me help you resuscitate your podcast, because it truly can be a business asset where you're spending 2 to 3 hours a week at most on all of your marketing. All of your marketing. Does that mean you you shouldn't be going in and engaging and all of that on social media? Well, if that's what you want to do, you can. But me and my business mentor, like, I do different things. You see me show up sometimes on social media. You see me not. That's because I'm testing things. But my mentor, my podcast mentor, because if you have a coach that doesn't have a mentor that's ahead of them, they're never going to move forward and you're only going to get so far with them. So I have a podcast mentor that's further along than me, and she does not use social media for anything except to run her challenges twice a year to invite people into her bigger mastermind. That's it. She's not on Instagram. She's not at all. I think she has an Instagram website, whatever it's called. She uses her Facebook group, again, to drive people in twice a year to her workshops. She uses Facebook ads to drive, but she's got a bigger business at this point. She uses Pinterest, which is SEO. She uses blogging, which is SEO, and her podcast. She's not even over on YouTube. So you don't need to be on all the platforms. She's got a multi-7-figure business. And she has a staff, and she has dedicated her staff to certain areas. You don't have to be on every platform. Start small. For me, my main focus right now is my podcast. And I like Facebook because I want somewhere to connect until I get a little bit more proficient in podcasting 2.0. So again, if you are struggling and you want a 45-minute audit, go over to podcastcpr.com. Your podcast can truly be a business asset where you can spend 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 at most, if you're really going all out for maybe a launch or something in your marketing efforts, and actually make an impact. So I'm really excited for this. I'm really excited for you to think beyond the downloads of, like, this is a networking opportunity. This is a content creation opportunity. This is a way for me to lean in. And like I will always keep saying is, people start a podcast, and there's something special about podcasting and expressing this way where you are allowing yourself to pivot a little bit more, and you feel like the box is a little wider where you can like wiggle, 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 wiggle out a little bit more, wiggle out a little bit more. And then all of a sudden you find your thing and you niche way in. And it happens every single time with every single one of my clients, whether they're a production client, whether they're a launch client, whether they're a coaching client. we start with this big idea, especially for multi-passionates. And as you go through, things start showing up more and more misaligned. And it's so much easier to tweak inside a podcast. And it's so much more healing. And it goes so much deeper into people's souls. So if you are a heart-centered, soul-aligned coach, somebody who, or coach or mentor or whatever you want to call yourself, hypnotherapist, Reiki master, any of those kind of people, like you have this powerful tool that you can use for good by getting into people's ears while they're doing something meditative. Again, if you need support, podcastcpr.com, and I'd love to talk with you. So go out and make today amazing, because you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you are worthy, and your story deserves a microphone.